All right, so Liron gave an amazing presentation around what Starknet is. And I think now it's the opportunity to basically speak about one of the products built on Starknet with Cairo. And we've been building for pretty much 2 years now with Cairo 0.1 as well as Cairo 1.0. So yeah, happy to share more how we're approaching, the scalability of DeFi within the Starknet ecosystem. So back in the day, we started working within Web3. We had a background of, working in Asia and kind of, tech scale-ups in Asia. And we understood that, the main issue was how do you scale DeFi for millions of users in the long term, right? And in order to do that, you needed additional tools that were not existing at the time. One of them is account abstraction, which obviously Starknet has natively. And the other was, the power of ZK rollups to verify computation and scale beyond the TPS that we had at the time at the L1 level. And in general, why account abstraction matters is because for users who are living in mobile-first countries like Indonesia or Vietnam, you don't really want them to go through the pain of having to set up their own wallet, having to, onboard and bridge and so on, right? You want to make it very easy. So in the long run, you need this technology and you need to wrap, these wallets within smart contracts to actually enable, proper onboarding. And the other aspect was, okay, are we going to do AMM or order book? And in that thinking process, we quickly realized that Binance does 6 million TPS on a peak day. There's no way that we can get that TPS with smart contracts on chain right now. So we needed to come up with a new solution that will help us scale while benefiting from the proving that Starknet gives to our solution. So ZKX is an omni-chain perpetual DEX. It's debuting with Starknet L2 and harnesses ZK proofs and account abstraction to actually achieve linear growth of the TPS of the order book. And we're going to talk a bit more in detail about how technically we achieve that. But the key aspect here is that you want to service these users in a very simple way so they don't have to think in the long term that you're actually using crypto, right? You want to abstract away the entire experience. So last week we announced the ZKX Appchain. And a lot of questions came our way from all directions on what the Appchain is. So the Appchain basically is an extension of Starknet that allows to scale the computation functions of the exchange. So that is order book, funding rate, all the different algorithms that usually, within the on-chain environment is very difficult to scale. But in most cases until now, what you had were black boxes, right? Someone spins up an Amazon Web Services instance, they run it there, and no one knows what happens with the order book, right? They could be selling the order flow, they could be, front-running you never know. Everyone has heard stories about BitMEX and so on. So we wanted to provide transparency, and transparency comes from having a ledger, from having some settlement that's happening on a blockchain. And for that, we're using our own internal substrate implementation. Some of you may have heard of Madara and what the amazing work they're doing with Rust-based stack within Starknet. So we took a similar approach and tailored it to the order book and the functions of derivatives trading. So there's going to be its own block explorer where you can check what's happening with the order book and with all the accounts and balances of the traders. So with Starknet, we're able to maintain self-custody of the user, while with the Appchain, we enable, basically scalability and pretty much, gasless trading from the get-go. Now, there is an interesting aspect here, which is accounts are mirrored on the Appchain, but funds are retained on L2. And by mirroring the accounts on the Appchain, you can actually update the balances. And if the underlying network, at some point, is a little bit jammed or gas cost is higher because there's a lot of airdrop farmers or, any given situation, you still can, the validator still can post the updates, when the network is a little bit less congested. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to continue operating, 24/7, independently of any underlying conditions. So we're not going to go over this. It might be too much for today's talk. But basically, it summarizes the same structure we talked about. And why we think this is important, because in the future, you can let the community run the validators. You can implement some sort of staking mechanism for the token, so you secure and provide some economic incentive around running validators at the Appchain level. And we're also quite excited about the idea of recursive proofing and, kind of, attaching the substrate and Rust stack into, the sequencing and the ZK proofing in the future. So I think, there's a lot of design possibilities in the space of the Appchain. And we kind of able to then match the best of both worlds. And there is something very interesting here, which is dependence on oracles. So the entire ecosystem is depending on oracles, right? And the refresh rate of oracles is not that good. And they don't support always every asset or data feed that you want. And this is very critical for derivatives trading. You want to be super fast, in line with whatever any price change that's happening on centralized exchanges. And that's why the Appchain architecture allows us to have the validators pulling price feeds directly from any API, form a TWAP, and then we can list any asset that we want. So effectively, anything that is listed by a centralized exchange can be mirrored on-chain and traded in a decentralized way. And we think that's very important, and it's one of the main limitations that a lot of perpetual DEXs have out there, along with the lack of APIs, right? If they're purely smart contract based, most of the times they don't even have APIs for trading. So that leaves a lot of professional traders and bot traders that cannot use these exchanges. So I would say maybe here we can talk a little bit about the governance side and the ZKX account. So I'm not going to reveal a lot of alpha, but some of these things are going to be released on mainnet this month. And the ZKX account basically is leverages account abstraction to allow users to have their own internal wallet through which they can use all of ZKX products. So that basically allows us to say, okay, you're a user on OKX. OKX supports withdrawals to Starknet. So you can withdraw directly to your ZKX account and start trading, for example. And vice versa, you can actually send your money straight to your OKX account and immediately withdraw to your bank account. Or you can integrate fiat on-ramps and off-ramps. So it offers you a lot of flexibility. So we're quite excited, to be as well open sourcing a lot of these contracts over time and seeing, how more of these platforms become more autonomous and they can scale on their own by onboarding liquidity to Starknet with their own account systems. And on the liquid governance, I think that is an interesting concept around derivatives trading and around tokens. And I always say that governance tokens are dead. They're really not that useful anymore, and they actually kind of don't serve the purpose for which they were created. And if you think about it, in the premise of the first wave of DeFi was, okay, we're going to release this governance token. You can use it to govern the DAO. You can use it to vote and make decisions. But you have to buy this token in the open market. So if you're a user of Uniswap, you have zero stake and zero say on what happens to the Uniswap treasury, even though you might be the top user, top 10 account on that particular AMM. So that's why we think it's very important that now that we're trying to build a new ecosystem, we actually provide new tools for better governance to the DAOs in the ecosystems. So liquid governance is what we're implementing for ZKX, but it obviously is going to be in Kaido, open source. We hope that everyone can take it and customize it in any way. But effectively, it's a set of governance smart contracts that allows you to provide voting power given any set of triggers and interactions with the underlying protocol. So give you a simple example. I'm trading on an AMM like JDSwap, providing liquidity on ZK Lend, right? And I've been using that system and that protocol for a long time. I should be able to have some voting power as long as I'm using the protocol and make decisions of what happens in the DAO. And that is something that, right now with most protocols in DeFi is not possible. And we think it's very important. And it can be different roles. It can be the traders, the validators, it can be the liquidity providers. Everyone that actually has skin in the game should be able to participate and have some voting power. So I think I actually covered a lot of these topics. And I'm mindful of the time, and people must be hungry for dinner, so don't want to kill you. But we ran our testnet on Starknet a few months ago, and we had a very interesting learning. So everyone in crypto creates these very complicated dashboards, trading terminals with all the bells and whistles, complex trading orders. And then when you actually talk to the users, you realize that, you know, they don't need all of that. They mostly don't even understand it. And it's actually making their trading experience worse. And, you know, if we think in the long run, where in a world where people should not even know that they're using Web3, and that they should just be using the web, you actually don't want them to go through the pain of having to, you know, learn so much about how to use your tools and products. That's why we're approaching the trading experience in both ways. One is around basic trading, and one is around advanced. And each of these trading modes have their own user journey, their own funnel. Advanced traders need complex rewards algorithms. They need to know they're valued for the liquidity they provide, for the trading strategies they provide. So they don't really need a leaderboard. They don't really need, you know, like complex gamification. But for a simple user that's trying to come and trade on Starknet, you know, from Vietnam or from Turkey, you might want to give them some quests, you know, some simple tools they understand to actually start using and taking, you know, their first baby steps around trading. And so this gamified aspect we think is very important in terms of, you know, achieving this onboarding experience. So DAO we have talked about, so I think that's okay. Most parameters of the smart contracts will be able to be delegated either to a sub-DAO or to any entity that wants to manage them. Right now, you know, let's say you have seen how, for example, Aave delegates its risk management to a certain other entities. So we think that giving the community the flexibility to choose who should manage, you know, the DAO is very important. So yeah, we talked about liquid governance, how the ZKX, you know, governance will work. So I think that's already covered. We call it digital shares. So basically, if you trade, if you stake the ZKX token, you get digital shares, and that equals to your ownership of the open source protocol. So, you know, happy to talk more about this in detail later on if you want. And yeah, a little bit of what we achieved. We did deploy on the Starknet testnet a few months ago. Transaction time went through the roof. We kind of jammed a little bit the network. But still, you know, we had 58,000 accounts created, 180,000 positions opened, and about $1 billion in volume. So yeah, we're quite happy about that. And growth has been quite crazy. Some of you may have heard of the ZKX Yakuza, which is sort of this fictional world, cyberpunk world we've created with NFTs and quests and different, you know, characters. So that drove us to, you know, yeah, insane growth in the community. We currently have, you know, plenty of traders around all of these different countries in crypto, which, you know, Turkey, Nigeria, Korea, China, you name them, Indonesia, and so on. And they completed over 1 million quests on Zili, and that was kind of crazy. At the time, we were at the top along with Polygon and some of the biggest DAOs in the space. So we're quite happy, you know, how much the community has contributed and put, you know, themselves into ZKX. And yeah, roadmap, I'm not sure I should talk about that. And why did the team add this slide here? All right, so I think this is alpha, so I hope no one takes a picture. So we're doing our second audit as we speak with Nethermind, which I already seen some of our Nethermind friends around here. We're releasing our second testnet, a new season of the Yakuza. There's a product coming to mainnet in September, so stay tuned in a few weeks' time. We have something coming to mainnet with Cairo 1.0. And yeah, we're looking at the mainnet launched very soon, as well as, you know, the full trading features being available to everyone. Thank you. I know it was a bit fast, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, yeah, all right.
I had you said about the oracles that you don't use the oracles. I'm not sure all the time, or is it like sometimes you use it, but because it's not listing all the data that is out there. So I have a question: how is validity of data that you get from some some website or whatever is verified? Because Oracle's sort of they promise it, that's correct. But what is about the ZKX?
So basically the question is around oracles and how do you verify the data that you get directly through the Appchain and make sure that it's actually real and accurate. So what we have found is that there's two problems with oracles. One is that they don't always call the original API. Sometimes they say, yeah, we refresh the price every second, but it's the same price. So that's one problem. The other is that the way they actually conform their TWAP can be arbitraged if you spot the pattern, because they might call an API every 30 minutes and another API every 10 minutes. So if you're able to detect those patterns, it actually provides an avenue for arbitrage. And we don't really want that to happen, right, in an exchange. So you need the validators to call in these different APIs, whether it's Binance, Coinbase, Bybit, OKX, and so on, and be able to then conform the TWAP. So the process is the same as an oracle at the end of the day. And obviously you need some risk parameters in terms of any validator that will actually provide you a price that's, let's say, outside of the TWAP plus minus 5% or 10%. So that price should be rejected, right, and not be actually pulled on chain. Now we're still working with Chainlink, we're still working with Redstone, with different oracles. So we still use them as a back check and as an actual security layer. But we want to make sure that the prices are refreshed as fast as possible. And obviously, if you have 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 sources, are exactly the same sources you're going to get, through a Chainlink. It's just, obviously, Chainlink has a wider variety of validators initially, and that's probably, their main advantage right now. But you can get faster refresh at a cheaper gas cost. Any questions, thoughts, doubts? Otherwise, you can catch me here, or our friend Naman over there with the ZKX t-shirt. You can also ask him any questions. We're going to be around. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.